Imagine dropping like $2 million on a pristine, high-elevation mountain ridge.
Right, the ultimate dream.
Exactly. You step out of your car, the mountain air is perfectly crisp, and you are staring at an uninterrupted 80-mile panoramic view of blue-green peaks. I mean, you feel like a king. You bought the ultimate luxury property.
Oh, for sure. You're on top of the world.
But then a few weeks later, a soil engineer walks onto that exact same piece of land and calmly informs you that the topography legally forbids you from flushing a toilet.
Yeah.
Your $2 million view is functionally unbuildable. And today, we are looking at the brutal, invisible reality of luxury mountain real estate.
It's the ultimate reality check for a buyer. You know, people fall in love with the postcard. They're completely captivated by that sweeping vista. And in that emotional high, they completely forget that they have to physically attach a habitable, multi-ton structure to the side of a jagged, unpredictable piece of the earth.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to completely reframe how you think about real estate.
And it really is a complete reframing.
It is. We are pulling from a brilliant high-end advisory piece titled The Topography of Luxury, along with a companion deep dive blog post on slope, drainage, and site positioning. Our geographical focus today is the Highlands Cashiers Plateau in North Carolina, but let me be clear, the lessons we are unpacking apply to anyone looking to buy land.
Right, whether it's a remote alpine retreat or just, an empty lot in your local suburbs.
Exactly. We want to move you past the superficial gloss of buying a view and teach you how to actually read the ground beneath your boots. Because here is the guiding philosophy for our entire conversation today. Land is not neutral.
Never neutral.
The mountain is always influencing the outcome, and ultimately what you don't see matters infinitely more than what you do. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the psychology of that first site visit.
What's fascinating here is the sheer power of human attention and how the environment basically manipulates it. In a market like the Highlands Cashiers Plateau, buyers are understandably drawn outward and upward.
Right, because everything about the environment is designed to pull your gaze to the horizon.
Exactly. You have these dramatic elevations, the filtered sunlight coming through the canopy of old-growth trees, the profound sense of isolation. You're looking at the sky. You're looking at the distant peaks.
You're looking everywhere except down.
Yeah. The absolute last place you are looking is down at the dirt, the rocks, and the pitch of the ground.
It makes me think about it like this: buying mountain land just for the view is like buying an antique painting based entirely on the ornate gold leaf frame, completely ignoring whether the canvas inside is actually holding up.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You're so mesmerized by the border that you don't notice the canvas is rotting or, stretched too tight or about to snap the second you try to hang it. The frame is worthless if the canvas can't hold the paint.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. I mean, you are buying a physical, three-dimensional piece of the earth, not a two-dimensional photograph. The source material points out a wild scenario that happens constantly.
But yeah, the two lots next to each other.
Right. You can have two properties sitting right next to each other on the exact same ridge. They have the exact same acreage. They share the identical jaw-dropping view. They're even priced the same. But they represent two completely different realities.
Because of what's under the surface.
Exactly. Plot A naturally features a subtle, gentle decline that allows a foundation to just sort of settle into the landscape. Plot B is aggressively steep and rocky, meaning it will fight the builder every single inch of the way.
And that means Plot B requires a completely different financial reality just to get a house out of the ground.
Drastically different. I mean, Plot B might require you to blast through solid granite for a month just to carve out a driveway.
Wow. A whole month of just blasting rock.
Yeah, or it might require massive, heavily engineered retaining walls just to keep the parking area from sliding into the ravine. The land is quietly determining how that home lives and what it costs long before any architect even sits down to draw up blueprints.
Because the mountain is always influencing the outcome.
Always. When you have to force the mountain to accommodate you, you are fighting a battle that the topography usually wins.
Which brings us to the very first physical factor you have to evaluate when you step past the frame and look at the canvas. The architecture of the earth itself. The slope. Now, on paper, slope sounds like basic middle school math, right? Rise over run.
It sounds elementary, yeah. But slope is the primary physical constraint of any build. The advisory piece emphasizes that it's not just about whether the land slopes. I mean, you're in the Appalachian Mountains, of course it slopes.
Right.
It's about how that slope transitions. Where does the land naturally fall away? Does it support a natural building area? What structural engineers and builders sometimes call a bench in the
Yeah,
topography.
let me challenge that for a second. If steep land requires so much aggressive engineering like drilling into bedrock, micropiles, pouring massive retaining walls, why even bother?
Well,
Seriously, why not just go buy flat land? Find a nice, gentle meadow down in the valley and save yourself the massive construction headache.
because if you buy the flat meadow in the valley, you sacrifice the exact reason you came to the mountains in the first place. You lose the panoramic view.
Ah, right, you lose the sky.
Exactly. You lose the high elevation, the cool summer breezes, that whole feeling of being perched above the world. The steepness isn't a defect, it's the very mechanism that creates those dramatic, sweeping vistas people pay millions of dollars for.
That makes a lot of sense.
The nuance the source material is trying to communicate is that steep land isn't inherently bad, but it acts as a rigid rule book. It hands you the rules of engagement. You just can't be surprised when those rules require a multi-story foundation and a highly restrictive driveway trajectory.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Right.
Because slope doesn't just dictate where you pour concrete. Slope dictates gravity. And gravity dictates the movement of the single most relentless force on any mountain water.
Oh, water. Yeah.
And we aren't talking about a little afternoon drizzle here. The Highlands Cashiers Plateau is technically classified as a temperate rainforest.
Which is wild to think about. It receives nearly 100 inches of rainfall annually.
100 inches?
Yeah. For context, Seattle gets about 39 inches a year. The plateau gets almost triple that. Let that sink in. Water up there isn't an occasional weather event that you wait out. It's a permanent, active feature of the environment.
Evaluating a property up there on a beautiful sunny Tuesday afternoon is like inspecting a ship while it's sitting in dry dock.
Right. It looks great on dry land.
Exactly. You can walk around the hull, look at the paint, and say, wow, what a beautiful boat. But you don't actually know how it behaves until it's out in the open ocean getting battered by a storm.
You have no idea if it's seaworthy.
Right. You don't know where the structural leaks are until the pressure's actually applied. A lot that feels perfectly firm and dry in July can turn into a literal waterfall during a sustained 3-day rainstorm in November.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, unseen water patterns dictate the long-term survival of a house. It is all about a concept called hydrostatic pressure.
Hydrostatic pressure.
Okay.
Break that down for us.
Think about what happens if you take an empty plastic bucket and try to push it down into a swimming pool. You feel that immense physical resistance, right?
Yeah, the water pushes back.
Exactly. The water wants to occupy that space, and it pushes back against the plastic with continuous heavy force.
It takes actual muscle to hold it underwater.
It does. Now, imagine that empty bucket is your concrete basement or your foundation walls, and the swimming pool is the mountain soil after 4 straight days of rain.
Oh, wow.
Millions of gallons of water are moving down the slope, hitting your foundation and pushing against the concrete with thousands of pounds of hydrostatic pressure.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. If you don't have highly engineered drainage like French drains, weep holes, gravel backfill, that water will eventually crack the concrete, flood the lower levels, or literally push the structural walls inward.
Because water always wins.
Water is lazy, and it is relentless. It always finds the path of least resistance down the mountain.
But wait, if water is always finding the path of least resistance, what happens when human beings alter that path? Let's say I buy a lot, and I engineer my drainage perfectly. My house is safe. But 2 years later, a guy buys the lot directly above mine, up the slope.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
He cuts down the trees, paves a massive, non-permeable asphalt driveway, and suddenly all that water that used to soak into the forest floor is rocketing down his driveway and shooting directly onto my property.
That is a phenomenal point, and it perfectly illustrates why the mountain is always influencing the outcome. You aren't just buying a discrete, isolated square of land.
You're buying into the whole system.
You're inheriting a piece of a watershed. Gravity always collects its tax. When you buy on a slope, you have to defensively evaluate not just your own lot, but the topography above you. Where's the water coming from and where's it trying to go?
Right, because if the land's natural water path intersects with your living room and you haven't given that water a doorway to pass through or around your house, the water's going to win.
Every single time.
So what does this all mean? We've got the visible architecture of the slope, and we've got the invisible engine of the water. But there's another hidden factor that we hinted at in the very beginning, and this one happens entirely underground.
The dirt.
We have to talk about dirt and septic systems, which I know is the absolute least glamorous topic when discussing luxury real estate.
It completely lacks glamour, but it holds the absolute most power. I mean, think about it. In a typical suburban development, a buyer looks at a flat, pre-graded lot and tells the builder, I want the house right in the center, facing the cul-de-sac.
And the builder just does it.
Right, because the lot is tied into a municipal city sewer system. But on the plateau and in most rural mountain environments, municipal sewer just doesn't exist. You have to process your own waste on site using a septic system. And the land dictates entirely whether that is legally and physically possible.
Because you can't just bury a tank and run a pipe wherever you want. The soil has to actually be able to handle it.
Right. It relies on a percolation test, or a perk test. An engineer digs holes across the property and fills them with water to measure exactly how fast the soil drains. It's a biological filter.
And what if it's just heavy clay?
If the soil is heavy clay, the water just sits there, pooling up like a bathtub. The waste would eventually bubble to the surface. And if the soil is too rocky, the water drains way too fast, meaning the bacteria isn't naturally filtered out before it hits the underground water table.
Contaminating the mountain streams.
Exactly. So it has to be this perfect Goldilocks zone.
So it's not neutral. The land literally tells you what you can and can't do.
Yes. The county health department will map the soil, and they will point to a very specific restricted zone on your property and say, this is the only place the drain field can go.
And this is where the heartbreak happens. You buy a 2-acre lot, you walk the property, and you find the absolute perfect, visually stunning plateau for your dream house. You can see the floor-to-ceiling windows perfectly framing the sunset. You map out the wraparound porch.
Oh, I've seen it 100 times.
And then the soil engineer taps you on the shoulder and says, nope, that beautiful plateau is the only spot on this entire property that perks. You can't build your house there, because that is legally where your septic drain field has to go. You have to build the house 50 yards back, tucked into the dark trees.
It is the ultimate veto power. You cannot simply point to a map and demand a house go there. You are entering a negotiation with the topography, and the topography holds all the leverage.
That's a huge shift in mindset.
It really is. You have to align your architectural dreams with the biological reality of the dirt early in the process. When buyers don't do this, they end up with incredibly expensive, heartbreaking adjustments. What you don't see matters more than what you do.
I love that framing. Entering a negotiation with the topography, it proves that land isn't this passive blank canvas. But let's say you successfully negotiate. You map the slope, you engineer for the water, you pass the perk test, and the land officially allows you to build. Now you arrive at the final piece of the puzzle, which is how the home is actually going to be experienced day to day, the daily livability.
This raises an important question that a lot of buyers overlook in the thrill of the hunt. How do you actually intend to live? The source material breaks this down into 3 crucial areas of livability: orientation, access, and lifestyle.
Let's start with orientation, because I think the amateur assumption is simply point the living room at the prettiest mountain.
Right. Which sounds logical. But orientation is about cardinal direction, and direction dictates almost every sensory experience inside that home. It dictates the lighting, the internal temperature, and the usability of your outdoor spaces.
So facing west isn't always best.
Not necessarily. For example, a purely west-facing view gives you spectacular blazing sunsets. But in the middle of July, that western exposure acts like a magnifying glass. It might bake your living room, fade your furniture, and make your outdoor deck unbearably hot to sit on in the late afternoon.
You're getting blasted by thermal heat when all you want to do is sit outside in the cool mountain air with a glass of wine.
Precisely. Whereas a different orientation, maybe facing slightly northeast, might lack the dramatic sunset, but it offers soft, filtered light all day long and a cool, shaded deck in the afternoon. Orientation also dictates how you interact with the view.
What do you mean by that?
Well, some lots offer what architects call a framed view. You only see the mountains if you stand at a specific angle in the kitchen. Other lots are situated so that the house wraps around the terrain, meaning you are living in the view from every single room.
Wow, okay. Which brings us to access. And man, this is the one I think is the most deceiving. When you are touring properties, you are in the honeymoon phase.
Oh, completely.
You drive up the mountain with your real estate agent in a high-end all-wheel drive SUV. You're chatting, you're looking at the trees. You don't even register the physics of the driveway. But you have to navigate that path every single day in every type of weather.
Driveway grade and road condition drastically alter human psychology.
They really do.
If your driveway requires a 15% grade climb followed by a blind hairpin turn on a cliff edge, it changes how you feel about leaving your house.
It's like having front row tickets to the greatest concert in the world, but you have to walk a tightrope over a canyon to get to your seat every single day.
That's hilarious, but it's so true.
Sure, the music is amazing once you sit down, but the sheer anxiety of the tightrope walk starts to ruin the experience. In the summer, a steep gravel driveway is an annoyance. But in January, when that same driveway is covered in a sheet of black ice, it turns into a bobsled track.
And suddenly you're trapped.
Right. If you are dreading the drive up to your own house, or if the local furniture delivery trucks literally refuse to attempt your road, that beautiful, expensive house suddenly feels like a prison.
Which is why the property must support your intended lifestyle, not just look good on a sunny day. And that ties directly into the third point: lifestyle structure. In these high-end mountain markets, you are generally choosing between two paths: a private, unrestricted parcel or an established, gated community.
And the daily rhythms of those two paths couldn't be more different.
Night and day. A private parcel offers pure, unadulterated seclusion. The experience is entirely centered on the raw land, the quiet, and the isolation. But that means you are the mayor of your own infrastructure.
You're on your own.
Exactly. If a tree falls across your mile-long driveway, you are the one out there with a chainsaw at 6 in the morning. An established community, however, offers a safety net. It offers maintained roads, underground utilities, clubhouses, and a built-in social rhythm.
So it's a trade-off.
It is. Neither is objectively superior, but they require wildly different mindsets. The land you choose dictates whether you are committing to a self-sustaining, rugged independence or a supported, socially integrated existence.
It requires a brutal level of honesty. You have to be honest with yourself about your tolerance for maintenance, your fear of heights, and what you actually want your Tuesday morning to look like. When you finally understand the mechanics of the slope, when you respect the hydrostatic pressure of the water, when you pass the biological soil tests, and when you align the orientation and access with your actual daily habits, that is when the magic happens. The source material captures this perfectly. Quote, "When understood correctly, the home doesn't fight the terrain, it settles into it."
It is the stark difference between imposing your will on a mountain and cooperating with it.
Imposing your will usually doesn't end well, right?
No. Blasting rock, fighting water, forcing a flatland design onto a vertical cliff, it's stressful, endlessly expensive, and often ends in structural or financial failure. Cooperating with the topography creates a legacy property that feels like it grew out of the earth.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What we've really been exploring today is a complete paradigm shift for the buyer. The next time you look at real estate, whether you're scouting a luxury estate on the Highlands Cashiers Plateau, a modest cabin in the woods, or even just an empty lot in your local neighborhood, we want you to use this new critical lens. Look past the postcard, look past the frame.
You have to earn the view by doing the hard work of understanding the terrain beneath it.
Exactly. Look for the water paths. Evaluate the severity of the slope, and imagine the engineering required to tame it. Consider the daily reality of the access road, and never forget the unseen biological reality of the dirt beneath your feet. Because land is never a passive participant.
No, it's not.
The mountain is always, always influencing the outcome. What you don't see matters more than what you do.
Which leaves us with something I think is quite profound to consider as we wrap up. If the topography ultimately dictates exactly where a home is allowed to sit, how deeply the foundation must be anchored, where the rainwater is permitted to flow, and how the inhabitants actually live their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
Are we ever truly owners of mountain property, or are we just temporary stewards who have paid a premium for the privilege of adapting to the mountain's rules?
Wow. Are we conquering the mountain or just paying rent to the watershed? Something to chew on the next time you're mesmerized by a horizon. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.